Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Matt Taglia, Senior Director of Emerson College Polling. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
You have a new poll from Emerson College Polling, Pix 11 and The Hill on the New York City mayoral race. And you and I talked about this race back in March, and it's shaping up to be, as we sit here right now, less than a month from the primary, shaping up to be a different race, a much tighter race. Talk to us about the takeaways from this recent poll.
Yeah, Brittany, and I think the big story here is the rise of Mamdani. So looking at that initial first choice vote, we still see Cuomo ahead. He's at 34%, but now we have Mamdani at 22% on that first choice. So, he's gone from, I think in our first poll, around 1% to 10% and now 22%. So this is really a meteoric rise for him. This is shaping up to be a competitive race.
Yeah, much tighter race. And when you and I were talking, Cuomo had a really strong lead. It almost looked like back in March that it was Cuomo's race to lose. So just how strong is that lead now, A? And B, how does ranked choice voting factor in here?
Yeah, and so I still think that this is a fairly strong lead for Cuomo. Once we get into those simulations through ranked choice voting, so we asked folks, as they will be asked on the ballot for their top five choices, not everyone selects all five choices. Once we run all those simulations through 10 rounds, we find Cuomo with 54% and Mamdani with 46%. Again, the ranked choice voting, that really is a big factor here. That second choice is really going to matter. But we do see quite a bit of consolidation here among the sort of progressive side for Mamdani, and then the more traditional side, a little bit, slightly left of center for Cuomo.
I want to talk exactly about the demographics that are supporting Governor Cuomo, because he really became a household name during COVID. Those COVID pressers were appointment viewing for a lot of people. He was touted as America's governor. And at one point, there was buzz that he would even be seriously considered as a presidential contender. But he did face parallel scandals. One, he faced a lot of criticism for the way that he handled COVID, especially in nursing homes. And two, he also faced a flurry of sexual harassment allegations, and he ultimately resigned as governor after them. So now, just a few years later, I'm really surprised at the demographics that are showing him the most support. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, this is where it gets kind of interesting. So Cuomo gets most of his support from older voters in particular, so those who are roughly over the age of 60. We see also that he is gaining support from minority voters. And in that final round of voting, Black voters and Hispanic voters in particular, majorities are backing Cuomo. I think roughly 75% of Black voters are backing Cuomo in that final round. It's a very diverse camp that Cuomo has. I think that's probably a big boost for him. And if Mamdani wants to get closer to the finish line, he's going to have to really boost his numbers among some of these minority voters. His coalition looks a lot different currently.
Talk to us about his coalition. Why are we seeing this meteoric rise from him, and who's exactly supporting him?
Yeah, so he has consolidated a lot of that progressive vote. We see that he is backed by a majority in final voting of white voters, also college educated, and especially those postgraduate voters, those folks who have masters and above. They're backing Mamdani, and younger voters as well. As you might expect, these progressive candidates, they tend to attract more support from younger voters. So Mamdani definitely has that coalition. He has managed to consolidate a lot of that vote. There's still some breaking for Lander and Adams, but I think in second choice, third choice, fourth choice, et cetera, they ultimately are going towards Mamdani. He just has to make sure that he's getting those folks to list him as their second, third, fourth choice if they aren't backing him first.
And now I want to talk about how Mayor Eric Adams comes into play here because he's running now as an independent. He did win as a Democrat before as mayor. And Mamdani has called out Eric Adams directly in his ads. Cuomo, not so much. He's made more generalized comments like, our city's in crisis, there's a failure in leadership, not really calling out Adams directly. Just how popular is Mayor Eric Adams in the Big Apple?
And I think it's suffice to say he is not popular. So looking at his favorability, he's at 19% favorable, 68% unfavorable. So a majority of New Yorkers have an unfavorable view of Mayor Adams. And I think one interesting number from this is that very favorable number. That's at 6%. Let's compare that for a second to President Trump in New York City. President Trump has 15% who have a very favorable opinion of him. So Adams is in a really, really tough spot here. He is deeply unpopular in the city. To the extent to which that's going to affect the Democratic primary for mayor, I'm not sure. But Adams is certainly an unpopular figure right now for New Yorkers.
And if I was a Democrat in New York, which is a historically blue city, and I'm saying that Donald Trump has a higher favorability rating than me, I mean, that would not make me feel good at all, especially about my state as a mayor, as well as my state in the race here. But New York City, as I said, blue city, but it did move more red during the 2024 election. Republican support grew in this city. Read the tea leaves for me a bit there. Do you think that means anything for this race, especially when you're looking at Cuomo and Mamdani? Cuomo's more moderate, Mamdani's way more progressive.
Yeah, and in the Democratic primary, I think that it is going to come down to this question of whether New York City Democrats are willing to back a progressive candidate. That remains to be seen, but there is definitely a swell of support for that progressive candidate. And if we look at all of the progressives on the ballot generally, then we do see that there's a sizable number who do back one of those candidates. If we look a little bit further towards the general election, I don't think that there's any danger here that a Republican or independent candidate is going to be elected as mayor. We tested both Cuomo and Mamdani on the ballot. They would both win. That's with Eric Adams as well, running as an independent. Cuomo does a little bit better. He gets 44%. Mamdani gets 35%. Some of that support that dissipates from Cuomo doesn't go towards Mamdani or undecided. Instead, it goes towards some of these other candidates. But nevertheless, I don't see any real danger that a Republican is going to win the general election.
To that point, the last time New York City saw a Republican mayor was Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and that was over 2 decades ago. So essentially, based on the numbers that you're seeing right now, whatever Democrat wins the primary in June, it's pretty safe to say they will be the city's next mayor.
I think that's definitely fair to say. We don't see any groundswell of support for Republicans on the ballot here. When we test the general election, we see that Curtis Sliwa is at 13% when Cuomo is on the ballot. He's at 16% with Mamdani on the ballot. Those are not high numbers. None of the independent candidates garner significant support. Adams included here, 15% at most. So yeah, I don't see any real risk here that a Republican or even independent candidate is going to make a difference on the general election ballot for mayor.
And based on some of the ads the campaigns are releasing, Mamdani's really focused on the cost of living. Cuomo's also focused on affordability in the city as well as crime. Are those issues that are resonating with New York City voters?
They are. So as you might expect, housing is the top issue. If we take that together with the economy, that accounts for a majority of folks' top issue. So those have been and will continue to be major issues, both nationally, statewide in New York, and especially in New York City. But I did find it interesting. Crime comes in third place with 19%. That's mostly driven by older voters. And those older voters are the ones who are backing Cuomo. So, I think that there is something to gain there for Cuomo and potentially some of the other candidates on the ballot who are a little bit more pro-police, but it shouldn't necessarily help Mamdani here.
Matt, you and I talked at length leading up to the 2024 election, and one of the top issues facing voters then was immigration, and immigration has affected New York City specifically. In recent years, over 200,000 migrants arrived in the city, and Mayor Eric Adams said that it would cost the Big Apple $10 billion over the course of 3 years. So, specifically in New York, how are voters feeling about President Trump's and the administration's policies surrounding immigration?
And New Yorkers are pretty negative towards the Trump administration's policies on deportations in particular. So 50% think that deportations have had a negative impact on the city versus 30% who say it has a positive impact. Again, we're looking a little bit more skewed towards older voters here who think that it has had a positive impact. Same goes for the folks who say that immigration is their top issue. These are primarily older, a little bit more conservative voters. And in terms of the sort of Democratic primary, those voters are going to largely back Cuomo. But as far as immigration having a major influence on the race, I don't think it's going to have much of one. I don't think that the candidates are making it their top issue. And that's fair. And I would not want to be necessarily tied, especially to the Trump administration's deportation policies here.
And as we know, the primary for the New York City mayoral race is on June 24th. So almost a month away, but between now and then, what specifically are you looking out for when it comes to this race?
And I'm going to be looking at that Mamdani number, whether that comes up a little bit in that first choice voting. We have a lot of folks here, though, who don't necessarily have a second choice. So there's going to be a lot to gain from that. The candidates themselves could be out there requesting that voters, even if I'm not your first choice, mark me as your second choice here, because that's going to play a major role. And I think some folks are simply going to skip their second, third, fourth, fifth, etc., because they might not be paying enough attention or not necessarily have strong opinions one way or another on their later choice candidates. But that's going to play a major role. Something else that I found interesting in this poll is that among the folks who say they are very likely to vote, this is a tied race in the final round. It's roughly 51-50% for Cuomo and Mamdani, respectively. So, I think the turnout is going to matter here, especially among sort of that older vote, Cuomo, and then the younger, highly educated vote for Mamdani. This is really anyone's race. We'll be watching it closely.
And we will be watching closely as well. And as you have more polling coming out of it, I hope you can come on and break it down. Matt Taglia, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany.